Gruesome Magazine.
Hello, once again, I'm Rostock Rotten, and this is Gruesome Magazine, where we review the very latest streaming and video on demand horror movies and sometimes extras each week. My co-hosts, in this case, the SLATTMAN and Christopher G. Moore, will join me to review spooky, scary, and gory genre offerings. And this is a Gruesome Magazine extra, something new. We're going to stretch our wings, so to speak. No, we're not. All right, we're reviewing Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, out in theaters now, and a lot of cool fantasy stuff we're going to dive into. But before we get into it,
there's horror in it too.
Well, there is horror. There is nightmares to be had. Joining me tonight, my co-host, the SLATTMAN, Christopher Slattery. How you doing, sir?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Doc?
I'm a little shaken.
But are you stirred?
I've been stirred as well. Oh, me. Where am I going with this? I don't know. But let's introduce award-winning filmmaker Christopher G. Moore.
I don't want to know if you've been stirred. I feel like that's a euphemism for something.
It can't be. No, not at all.
Or maybe it's a Dungeons and Dragons thing.
Yep, Dungeons and Dragons.
We need to roll a 20 to make sure you're stirred or not.
Oh. And yes, if I get a 15 or better, I'm stirred. If I get 0, no, shut up. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to review.
You're not a master of your dungeon here.
I know. It's just like, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. We're going to review it tonight. We're going to give you our first impression. That first impression will be spoiler free, and then we're going to dive into discussion. We'll get into spoilers. They're fun spoilers. They're not going to ruin the film. So don't worry about stick around. And then we'll wrap up things with our score 1 to 5 and our favorite scene. It's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy this. And if you enjoy it, which we hope you do, and I just said it twice, so you know you will, hit the like, subscribe, and share with a friend buttons. And that'll help us find more movie fans just like you.
It's like creating magic, but using your keyboard or your phone.
What he said. All right, let's get into things. Let's start off with a brief synopsis of what this is. It is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Synopsis: a charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers embark on an epic quest to retrieve a lost relic. But things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. Directors are John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, written by those two and Michael Gilio. Starring, this is quite the cast: Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, Rege-Jean Page, Justice Smith, Sophia Lillis, Hugh Grant, Chloe Coleman, Daisy Head, and many others.
A cameo.
And there's a couple of cameos. One, I was really surprised, and actually I want confirmation that it's actually who I thought it was. I believe it is, but we'll talk about that in the spoilers. We'll talk about that in the spoilers. It's kind of cray-cray. Let's get into it. What our first impressions were. And SLATTMAN, you, sir, are up first.
So first things first. I love that the main character is a bard because it makes so much sense. Just make the charismatic doofus the main character of the story, and I love it. But it's kind of weird that they call him a thief because he's not a rogue anyway. Moving on.
But maybe he is.
I don't know. He did pretty bad at his stealth checks. I loved this movie. I think it's way better than it had any right to be. There has not been a very good Dungeons and Dragons adaptation outside of a couple of video games, like ever. Like the movies, the other movies are bad. The cartoon is charming but not great. Like the books are, they have a lot of people like them, but they're mostly, they're okay to good, for the most part. They're there to really just kind of deepen the lore of the worlds. But this movie is actually it's just fun. It is just a fun popcorn movie that has a very engaging story. It has I think it does a very good job with its storytelling. There's not a lot of tropes that it uses that feels tropey. You know, to uh, to pull a Christopher G. Moore, I don't think that they exposition just to exposition. There's a reason that they exposition usually, and that's good. And it's got good CGI and it's good acting, good soundtrack, and the humor is just I liked the humor. Apparently not everybody likes the humor, but I liked the humor. So yeah, first impressions, it's good. It's better than I expected.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. Let's find out what Christopher G. Moore thought. What was your first impression of Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves?
Well, first of all, I do want to mention that my interest in Dungeons and Dragons has never been that big. I did play Dungeons and Dragons once in high school with a good friend of mine, and I hated it. I found it boring. I don't mean to, and I have friends that are big into it, and I have friends that do these huge campaigns, and they do all this special effects stuff. I guess maybe if they had that back in the day, I might have enjoyed it more. And I do watch a lot of, but the weird thing is I do watch some YouTube channels or TikToks that show like stuff from some of the campaigns. So going to this, I had kind of had low expectations. You know, my thoughts are on Dungeons and Dragons. I used to watch the 80s show back in the day. And and I have a sort of ancillary knowledge of all that stuff, you know. So I didn't have high expectations, but I laughed so much throughout this film. I love the humor but it's one of those things where they do such a great job of incorporating the fantasy and I'll have to say there are some horror elements. There's actually one part it was a jump scare for me. It made me jump in my seat. I was like, and I felt so embarrassed. I shouldn't be jumping during a fantasy movie. But the villains are actually genuinely scary. Well, scary and sexy. I don't know, something about the Sophia character. I was like, I was like, I feel very weird being turned on by this villain. But yeah, there's some really creepy stuff, but it also had like a Army of the Dead type, not Army of the Dead, but Army of Darkness type look to it. Yes, or feel to it when it came to the comedy, especially with the animated corpses scenes and stuff. But yeah, and I think I don't know, the repartee, a lot of the back and forth between the characters. I think Chris Pine is freaking hilarious in this. And I think him also having to go against Hugh Grant, who has his own sort of snarky humor about things. And it did. I mean, it was one of those things to where we've seen this before, where you have films that have a sort of a contemporary feel when it comes to dialogue and talking and stuff. And it had that contemporary humor aspect of it. But then it had then you'd have like a cat person or a dragon or all these different things. So it's almost like, you know, a parody version of Game of Thrones at times, but minus the incest. But and I will say, I love Holga crushing on the short kings. Come on. So yeah, I thought this movie was very enjoyable, and I think it had such a great balance of like the action. It had some really great fun action sequences. I think if I were to critique it, there was some very noticeable, like, okay, this is a very green screen scene here, that there was kind of limitations. And also there's one scene where people are fighting and it just looked like they went out and like some park and fought it. I guess I'm so used to like seeing fighting scenes with people in swords and stuff that it's a little bit more I guess they do a little bit more like a look to it. I just felt like it felt people LARPing as opposed to fighting. So there's a few things where
which
I felt
might
like
be appropriate, right?
Which might be. I mean, the movie costs like, I guess, 150 million. So there's still going to be some kind of limitations to it when it comes to like special effects and stuff. But I don't know. I found it to be very enjoyable. There's like so many, there's like so many running jokes, you know, and even how like it kind of bookends with the same type of joke with a different punchline. So, and also just wait a little bit in the credits, because there's a little mid-credit sequence which is again they keep beating the same, but I want to say not beating the same dead horse. It's actually really funny callbacks to jokes from previously. So yeah, I know I really enjoyed it. I thought it's a fun movie, you know, and I'm kind of, you know, I know I went into it really with low expectations, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd love to see it again. And seeing it on the big screen, I think really works for a lot of the big action scenes, because it has a very Marvel feel, I guess, some of the fight scenes and stuff, because there's a lot of people zooming around doing different things. But I love a lot of the different characters, like the girl that can turn into like different animals and stuff. There's some, I don't think I've ever seen that. Is that a real creature, like a half owl bear? An owl bear?
The owl bear, yeah, the owl bear.
Okay, yeah. There's some really cool stuff in this. Sadly, this may look into playing TD, if, you know, just a lot of the cool stuff that's in this. It's such a big universe, and I think you could tell the people who created it are like geeky fans of it, and they incorporate it. And there's a nice little reference to Critical Role, and I've watched like maybe little snippets here and there, but there's a really funny bit that I laughed out loud, and I've never watched a full episode of Critical Role. So anyway, I had a lot of fun. I thought it was a blast.
I did too. You know, I played D&D back in the day, but never never in a way that made me a huge fan of it, but I loved the fantasy elements of it. And then when Magic the Gathering came along, it made that game so much fun. And now they're both owned by Hasbro. And so is this movie, by the way, is partially owned by Hasbro, or produced by them, at least, if Hasbro can stick around. But that aside, yeah, you know, from experience, there's been one serious, unfortunately, Dungeons & Dragons movie, and then one that was about Dungeons and Dragons, which had, you know, back in 80 something, 81 or 82, and it had oh my god, why am I forgetting what his name is? But there was actually, you know, it was about how Dungeons & Dragons is actually bad for people, and it turned them into bad people doing bad things. Why am I forgetting who was in it?
Like Satanic Panic type stuff?
Yeah. Hang on a second. I got to find out. You know, I'll come back with that. And then, of course, the 2000 movie that was garbage.
The Wayans brother.
Yeah. Wow. But this one was a lot of fun. It has an energy. It has chemistry between the characters. You get. It has a family element that really is at the core of the film, that really makes the movie work in a lot of ways. It's not entirely perfect. I think it runs a little long from time to time, but at the same time, when it does work, it's really good and real fun. I think it's quite the enjoyable movie. And I would not only like to see this again, Christopher, I think I'd like to see more. I'd like to see them make more films like this. I think they could get a franchise out of this. Now, I will say, before we get into spoilers, is that the first 10 minutes, I was a little worried. I was a little like concerned. I was like, oh, this is going to not work. This is garbage. I really did not like the first 10 minutes or so. Then it starts getting better. And then what really helps this movie is that it sticks the landing. The last 20 minutes of this movie is terrific. And there's a huge heart at it toward the end that really makes the movie land on such a great note, and such a warm, heartfelt note, and puts a huge smile on your face, from the action sequence to the, you know, this note that I'm talking about, that it really just, when you walk out of the theater, that's what you remember, and that helps a film, you know, come out with a good review, because that's, you know, if that had happened earlier and then it had stinky stuff at the end, then you'd be going, well, I don't know. But if you land on that, good times. There are sequences in this that are a lot of fun to bring back characters that you want to see in the movie, you know, like the Mimic and the gelatinous cube and owlbears and stuff like that. There's all kinds of things, and you know, if you play Dungeons & Dragons, you'll recognize names and locations and stuff, and of course, you know, the character types, from, you know, all from bards to paladins to wizards and everything, right? And it's a lot of fun. But last thing, I don't think you need to know anything about magic together. Dungeons and Dragons, even. I don't think you need to know anything about Dungeons and Dragons to go in this movie and enjoy it. It is the fantasy elements are so strong that you're going to recognize just the fantasy elements, and of course the chemistry between the characters really make this work. And it's kind of a testament to Dungeons and Dragons itself, because so much of what is in Dungeons and Dragons has become part of fantasy. It has probably guided a lot of fantasy writers along the way, right? And if you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you recognize that in other fantasy films. But so I think it's familiar enough for those who have never played Dungeons and Dragons to really still get into this film. I think it might be. I was a little worried about Chris Pine being the lead in this, because he doesn't always work, but I think he's great in this, and the chemistry between him and Rodriguez it really works. It's really strong. So I enjoyed the hell out of this movie, surprisingly.
Well, to me, I kind of relate it to like the Harry Potter movies. You don't necessarily have to read the books to get the references or to understand certain elements of the fantasy elements. And I think the same thing goes for this, and I will say, like, I think the most shocking thing is, like, for me, is like, again, I laughed the whole way through, but then there was like a jump scare. And then at the end, I got emotional because it got so sort of like heartwarming and beautiful. And I think that's a testament of trying to telling a story that has all these different elements and makes you integrated into enjoying the story and following along with the characters going. Also, all the crazy sort of like scenarios they put themselves in and stuff, that feels like a D&D campaign. You know what I mean? That feels like, what if we do this or do this, maybe we can get out of this. And I think that's and I've heard, like, a lot of my friends have said that too. It's like, this feels like one of our D&D campaigns. And I think that's, again, they're really sort of playing into the people who actually play Dungeons and Dragons. They kind of see that, because I think this whole thing of it, it's all a game of chess when it comes to, like, okay, if we do this, if I use this charm, or if I use this amulet or whatever, I can get myself out of this specific scenario and we can sort of win by the end. And I think that's how it kind of plays out, especially when they're trying to get out of that sort of like that gauntlet arena or whatever, all the stuff that's happening in that, which, for those of you that are fans of the 80s cartoon, you might reckon that they had all these different people that showed up, and there's a whole team of people who are dressed just like characters from the 80s cartoon, which made me smile, because I went to the Alamo Draft House and they always show all these different things that kind of tie into the movie, and they showed the intro to the cartoon, and I was like, this is giving me the feels. So yeah, and I love that they had that kind of stuff in there, but even if you didn't know, you just saw it as different things. But if you did know, you did know. Same thing when the magician, the wizard guy, when he said fresh cut grass. I think if you watch Critical Role and you've seen that little bit they keep throwing on, like, you see it pop up on TikTok and stuff, you'll get that reference, which, if they can't fully reference in that, otherwise it would be an R-rated movie. But that joke is around. But yeah, there's a lot of those things I think that you'll get. And also we get, I think most people were kind of shocked by the big cameo that happens, the halfling that shows up, which I think Variety has an article where they talked about how that came about. That originally was supposed to be a director friend of them, and then they're like, we need somebody, a bigger star that can just pop up and make people like, what?
I can't believe they got that person.
Well, he was shot separate from everybody. It was all he wasn't in the same room as Rodriguez. They just shot him on a big chair in front of a green screen. So.
I wonder if she knew that's who it was going to be. So
I know they shot all the stuff ahead of time, I think.
Yeah.
So
it's a fun cameo, and it's kind of you'll pinch yourself. You'll say, is it really that? Is that who it is?
Well, they sent the whole movie to him, and he's like, I love it. I'll do it. and then they shot it. And I think that one of the directors, the guy that was from Freaks and Geeks, actually read as Rodriguez to him.
Nice. Yeah, so the directors, John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, did a movie called Game Night about 3 or 4 years ago, pre-COVID. And it's a little film that is really wonderful, but not many people talk about it, right? Because it kind of went under the radar and everything. But it really showed promise, and they really excelled. I think they did a great job directing this film. The style of it, the pacing of it, it really works for this genre. So good job on them.
Yeah, they just had fun with it too. You know, I never thought I'd see a fat dragon.
But I'm sure that plump dragon has something to do with something, but I've never seen it before. But it was hilarious.
But I think, you know, we always see these stealthy, muscular dragons. We don't see some little fat, like extremely
huge
fat. Yeah. To where he's just like, he just slides or rolls places. He can't even fly anymore. He just slides and rolls, and that had me laughing. So especially when he's like, he can't move, so he's just roll. That's so funny.
And he can't even like light his own fire, which is hilarious. And then they have a gag on that. So you were talking about the gags that come back around, and they do that quite a bit, especially with the end of the dragon scene, which was kind of funny. And I'm sure they shot another one where a different finger was lit on fire. I'm sure.
Maybe. Well, again, that's really great storytelling. You throw these elements out there, and it could just be a throwaway bit or a throwaway joke or whatever, and it plays into later how they kind of utilize that. You know, same thing with the amulet that makes somebody disappear, or there's all these different things that they utilize at some point, or they figure out how to utilize it.
I think the biggest one is probably one of the big themes of the movie, honestly, with the Chris Pine's character believing in everyone else can do their job, you know, do their role, and how he's saying that like throughout the entirety of the movie, from the beginning to the end, always like, no, I believe in you, just, you know, just do it, you know, you can do it, just do it.
Yeah, especially with Justice Smith's character, the wizard. It really, that's the strongest one that happens with. Mm-hmm. And his little arc is really quite meaningful and powerful, you know, emotionally on top of it. And of course, the one between him and his daughter, even more so, right? Between and the little MacGuffin that they have that's associated with it. Really, I can't believe they made this movie so heartfelt.
Mm-hmm. Well, heartfelt, but then it's like I just saw a lot of cool stuff I haven't seen before. I mean, like the whole like how they use like the portal stuff.
The portal stuff was great.
With trying to get into the where all the treasure, the vault or whatever. I mean, that when they're on that like the cart or the horse-drawn cart, I was like, that's a really inventive thing that, you know, I've never really seen in movies before. You know, I'm sure it's played out in like D&D campaigns or something, but I just thought that was such an inventive and fun action sequence. And again, the whole humor of it, like when he's stuck and the guards look up, she's like, she's pulling on the legs. I mean, there's so many goofy bits that are just like, they're just so freaking funny. I don't know. I think just the comedic scenarios that they get themselves into, you know.
I think my favorite one is the little brain monsters, and the paladin's like, quick, or be quiet. They tend to go for the most intelligent one. They pass right by, and Chris Pine's like, that's hurtful or something like that.
Well, I think, well, I mean, you have a character who's all about charisma, and so he's always making jokes. He's always making comments on stuff. And Hugh Grant kind of does this very same thing, because there's a whole bit with him like, oh, that's extremely hot. You know, I mean, there's like just stupid things where they where I think in a normal thing you wouldn't call out things, you wouldn't automatically just call it out of the blue, and here they just make reference to it right in there. There's, and I think that just adds to the humor of it, because it's not. I mean, it's almost a little bit of a meta-ness to it, as well, because it's almost like the kind of things you would think about when you're watching it, but I think I don't know. I think that element of humor when it comes to a lot of the scenes, I think it just shows that they had a real wit when it came to sort of writing this dialogue between these characters that sometimes are not only witty and stuff, but also shows the heart and the connections all these characters had between each other. I mean, even I love the bit with the what was the guy from I think his name is
Rege-Jean.
Yeah, he was at the show on Netflix or whatever. He I don't know what kind of character is he? Is he like a?
Well, he's kind of made to be a paladin, although he's never referenced as a paladin.
But I love how
he was on Bridgerton, I think.
But again, like the little bit of knowledge I have about D&D, a lot of times I learned it from playing role-playing video games, but sometimes in order to like create your strength or whatever, your intelligence has to go down. And so he's almost like this pretty boy character who doesn't get people's references or doesn't get sarcasm. And there's just so many really funny bits where they'll make a joke and he'll make some straight like idiot type thing, like, well, I don't I would never do that.
Incredibly dry humor.
Yeah.
What's really funny about that is it's kind of the other strength-based party member does the exact same thing. Holga, like, has the charisma of like a friggin' donkey at times, and like very blunt, very like says things like out of just that shouldn't be said in the situation, just the same as the paladin. And apparently the directors actually, when they were the writers and directors, when they were writing, they made actual player sheets for each of the characters that they were writing for, so they could reference and say, when I'm writing this line of dialogue, would someone with this charisma score actually say that, or would they say something stupider? Or would they say something more intelligent? And I thought that was really neat.
I did love the bit where he's walking, he's like, he just walks straight, right? And it's like, is he gonna walk around that rock?
Nope. Gonna go under the rock.
I mean, I don't know. Just and again, I think that you have those kind of meta type elements where they call out like what the other characters, how they normally react to things, or how they would normally act, I guess, even if in your campaign your character can't do certain things. And those, I don't know, that humor just cracked me up to where it was just so many moments throughout that just the how the characters reacted to things just made it even more hilarious.
So the director played Sam on Freaks and Geeks, is what you were referencing.
Yeah.
That's insane. And if you look at him, he looks just like himself.
He
hasn't aged a bit, except for he's just taller. All right, well, there you go. I think some of you might be surprised about how much we enjoyed this movie, but let's wrap things up with our score, 1 to 5. I can't wait to hear what those scores are, and of course our favorite scene, and that's going to be fun too. Slatman, start us off.
I loved it. I think it's a great love letter to Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's a great love letter to role-playing games in general. And it's just a fun movie. It's a fun movie that feels like a wild and crazy and quirky campaign. It has all of the best parts about that, and I love it. I love it for that. It's not perfect. Like Christopher G. Moore said, there were some scenes that looked a little cheaper than the others, but then I have to point out that there are some scenes that look freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Like the graveyard looked so good.
Yep. The hands fighting. Oh my God. That was so much fun.
Yeah. So just, I really enjoyed it. And then, the special effects, I think they really made the things that matter look great. All the spells, all of the characters, all of the non-human characters.
Yes. Like somebody mentioned the cats. Oh my God, the cat people were amazing.
And like I swear, like Jonathan looked like a puppet almost. Like he looked so good. But yeah, I really, really, really enjoyed this movie. I'm gonna give it a 4.25.
Very good.
And
Very good.
my favorite scene is the scene where the they have Chris Pine's character playing the song as a decoy,
Oh,
and as Simon's foot gets stuck, Chris Pine starts to get all deformed. And by the end, they're just like, I think they're catching on to us. Run!
That was, oh my god, that was the best sight gag for me. I loved that scene. Loved it. All right,
Yeah.
Christopher G. Moore, let us know what's your score.
That felt like, you know, when you see those outtakes from old Pixar movies where the characters look like the
oh my god, you're right.
the pixelated characters like all kind of wonky. That's what it felt like. Sounded like something from a video game. So I don't know if they were trying to reference that, but yeah, that, I mean, again, there's like so many really fun things that they did in this. Yeah. Just talking about this, originally I was giving it a 4, but I'm going to give it a 4.25 as well now. Now I'm thinking about all these great parts of this. And I'm kind of glad more people, I think, are on our side with enjoying the humor of it. Because I think one of my friends, he had his first reaction first, and he's like, wait till it goes to screaming. But all these other friends were saying, this is great. This is real written. It's really funny. So as for favorite scene, you know, there could be a lot of favorite scenes from this movie.
Could be.
But I don't know. I just something about that fat dragon.
I
don't know. Something about that, because like he's having a hard time even coming out of the wall, and then he's just he just slides, and then just that moment where he like rolls like a puppy. You know, like when a baby can't like move his arms, and he's just rolling just to move places. I was like, this is the funniest thing I've ever seen.
And then when he tries to fly, he can't.
And he just got little, you know, and he's so large he can't even like use his fire properly. He's just so lethargic. I don't know. I kind of wish they'd had dragons like that in Game of Thrones or something. But
oh my god, that'd be hilarious.
But yeah, and I think those kind of things, taking things that we normally know and just throwing. I mean, maybe it is in D&D, but I've never seen that in any kind of movie or property before. So I don't know. Just that, it's nice to laugh every time I think about that. You know, seeing it, especially seeing the theater, that big thing, and people are like, oh. Even those crazy red wizard guards or whatever are like, oh crap. Even the badass guys are like, uh-oh, this guy's gonna eat us. That was so much fun.
Yeah, I had a ball with this. I'm going to give it a 4.25 too. We'll just make it straight up that. Again, talking about it has made me enjoy it even more. Just remembering, you know, the bits and pieces. I'm surprised. I'm going to choose something different, but I'm surprised we didn't choose the graveyard scene. I do want to say that if you saw the trailers and you think the graveyard scene has been spoiled, it has not.
No,
it is not. There's so much more to it, and it's great. But I'm going to choose a different scene because it's another example of that writing that you're talking about, Christopher G. Moore, you know, where they say something and it comes back around. Our shapeshifter goes to find out what's up and starts off as a fly, and then gets the villain discovers that she's there and kind of exposes her, and they all chase her out, all the way out of town, right to she's very out of town, but she changes from creature to creature. And that scene, that whole chase scene, is
amazing.
I was just like, that's fantastic. And you know, changing into creatures when she needs to. But the kicker is, and this is the gag part of it, is that, you know, she ends up being a deer at the end, which is what the wizard said that she wanted to be, right? She should be a deer. So and it made Chris Pine's character so upset. Oh, okay, she was a deer. So you know, it's that kind of writing, that kind of self-awareness of the story, not necessarily the property, but of the story itself, its own story, its own existence, that really makes this movie rise above. And this has been a great year. I mean, the number of films that have come out and have actually been really incredible and enjoyable and fun watches is extraordinary. You know, starting off with Megan and Scream, you know, in the horror sections, Megan and Scream 6, and of course, Christopher, you would add John Wick 4 to it. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
I'm so far behind.
It's amazing.
But it's been a fantastic 3 months. We're only 3 months into it, and there's not too many duds. Not too many duds. So I'm happy about that.
I think we're all happy about that. Yeah, there's more to come just this month.
This April's going to be insane.
For genre and non-genre stuff. You know?
April's going to be bonkers.
I think all of our most anticipated movie comes out this month.
Yeah, and now that you bring it up, I just want to really mention this to you, all those who are still hanging out with us with Gruesome Magazine and Horror News Radio. In April, we are celebrating 10 years. 10 years of podcasting, and it started in 2013 with the Evil Dead film that came out, and our 10th anniversary celebration will begin with our review of Evil Dead Rise this month in April. So that's fantastic that worked out that way, and it will end toward February of next year with a little thing you'll find out more about on the site in future episodes. A thing we're calling the Grue-Crews. Almost like Grue-Crews. The Grue-Crews. So with everybody going on a cruise, Grue-Crew and Grue believers alike. So look for more information about that. It's going to be a blast, and we have special surprises and things in store all year long, starting with, of course, the opening celebration with the review of Evil Dead Rise, which I think Christopher G. Moore is really looking forward to.
I'm debating. I may pull a Star Wars where I might go see it multiple times.
Oh my goodness!
Opening weekend,
well,
maybe
the buzz is insane. The buzz is insane on it. So
just buy a ticket for showing number 1, and then showing number 2, and then showing number 3, and showing number 4, all on Friday.
You do know I did that for the last few Star Wars films, but I may not do that. But I did watch I've watched some of the stuff like the South by Southwest interviews they did when they screened there and stuff. But yeah, I've heard a lot of good buzz around it. So I think I'm more. Yeah, I think this is going to be more my jam than the last Evil Dead film, which it was okay, but it just wasn't. But I think this is a good combination of the two, the OG and the new G.
The new G. That's the Rege-Jean. All right. Well, there you go. That's our review. Let us know what you think of Dungeons & Dragons down below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Christopher, SLATTMAN, thank you for joining me. This was so much fun.
I think we rolled a 20 on this podcast.
There you go. There's a madman.
Maybe we should do a campaign for.
Oh my God, that would be insane.
I have friends that could probably pull that stuff together if we wanted to do that. We'll have to see if people might be interested in that.
Oh my goodness, that'd be bonkers. All right, well let's get at it. Let's say good night.
Good night.
Good night.